Hey there, welcome back. Tonight we were taking a quiet journey into something often forgotten, the empire that never really died when Rome fell. It drifted eastward, across mountains and seas, and settled beside the Bosporus, where sunrise and sunset brushed the same horizon. So let's slow down, breathe a little, and wander through marble streets and candle-lit domes. All you have to do is settle in, get comfortable, and let the story drift over you, like the soft rustle of pages in a dusty old library. Before we start, a small favor. If you enjoy these slow, sleepy journeys through history, consider liking the video or subscribing. Only if you really enjoy it. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I like imagining this invisible web of listeners scattered across the world, drifting off to the same tale under different skies. Picture this. The year is 330 AD. The Roman world still stretches far and wide, but the West is crumbling, exhausted by ambition. In the East, Emperor Constantine I rides toward a glittering inlet, where Europe and Asia lean toward one another. The air smells of salt and pine. Gulls circle lazily above the harbor. Here he decides to build something new, a second Rome, but wiser. He calls it Nova Roma, though people soon whisper a different name, Constantinopolis, Constantine's city. At dawn, the sea looks like molten glass. Builders hammer marble, priests bless foundations, and merchants arrive with spices and silk. The city rises slowly, layer upon layer, stone upon dream. Aqueducts snake across hills, a grand forum gleams. Statues of ancient gods stand uneasily beside Christian symbols. You can almost hear the blend of languages, Latin orders, Greek gossip, Aramaic prayers. No one yet calls it the Byzantine Empire. To them, it's still Rome, just reborn, quieter, more enduring. Let's take a moment to walk those first streets. Imagine sun-washed courtyards filled with chatter. The hiss of oil lamps at dusk, the echo of sandals on mosaic floors. Scholars copy scrolls, arguing softly about Plato. Sailors unload amphorae of olive oil, laughing with women selling figs. Somewhere a bell tolls from a church still smelling of wet plaster. Even the breeze seems thoughtful here. Constantine dreams big. He wants this place to be eternal, a bridge between faiths, continents, centuries. So he fills it with relics and wonders, a fragment of the true cross. A golden column topped with Apollo's statue, later reimagined as his own. He gives the new city senators baths and laws. And then, like all emperors, he leaves it to time. When he dies in 337, the empire divides again between his sons, squabbling like gulls over bread. Yet Constantinople keeps growing, its walls thick and confident. By 500 AD, the western half of Rome has vanished into dust and ruin. But here the lamps still burn. The old Roman eagles have traded their armor for silk robes and golden mosaics. Latin gives way to Greek. But the idea of Rome, its law, its pride, its memory, never leaves. Some nights I like to imagine what it must have felt like for a traveler arriving by sea. You'd sail past the dark Marmara waves, and suddenly the city would appear, tier upon tier of walls, palaces gleaming like pearls, domes shimmering in morning mist. The great chain across the harbor glints like a serpent of bronze. Behind it, the sound of hymns floats across the water. It must have felt like approaching heaven, or at least the closest thing humans could build to it. Inside, the rhythm of life is gentler than the wars beyond the horizon. In small courtyards, families eat bread dipped in honey. Children chase cats along marble steps. In the palace, courtiers whisper, scribes record every nod of the emperor, and in the kitchens, cooks argue about garlic, proving that even empires depend on small quarrels. Monks copy manuscripts until their fingers ache, then warm them over little braziers. Even the saints, one writes in the margin, need thicker gloves. I like that. It's the kind of quiet humor that survives centuries. Then comes Justinian, a man of vision and exhaustion. He wants to restore Rome's glory, not just preserve it. So he builds, and fights, and builds again. His generals reconquer lost provinces. His architects raise something the world has never seen, the Hagia Sophia. Imagine standing beneath it for the first time. light streaming through 40 windows, gold mosaics glittering like captured sunlight. When the emperor enters, the choir begins. The scent of incense curls upward, and for a moment the entire empire seems to hold its breath. When Justinian whispers, "Solomon, I have surpassed you," you can almost forgive him the pride. But glory has a cost. Plague sweeps through the city, a silent army. Streets once filled with laughter fall quiet except for the rattle of carts carrying the dead. The historian Procopius writes that even the sea was thick with corpses. Still, the city endures. It always endures. Let's drift through one of its quieter evenings. A thin moon hangs above the hippodrome. The stands are empty now, though earlier the crowds had roared for the blue and green chariot teams. By lantern light, the mosaics shimmer with leftover energy. Somewhere a poet recites lines to a small audience, his voice echoing off marble like a slow tide. There's melancholy here, but also peace, the kind that belongs to cities that have seen too much. The centuries slip by gently. Walls are rebuilt higher, domes repainted, books recopied again and again. New emperors rise, new saints are canonized, and new conspiracies whisper through palace halls. Yet the same candles still flicker in Hagia Sophia. The same seagulls still circle above the harbor. Outside the gates, the world changes. Goths, Persians, Arabs, all come and go. But the city watches, serene, like an old philosopher who's heard every argument before. By the 9th century, Constantinople feels less like a city and more like an idea, a kind of living museum of human persistence. Its scholars preserve what the West has forgotten: Aristotle, Euclid, Homer. Its priests debate the nature of Christ in words sharp enough to split centuries. And yet, in taverns near the harbor, fishermen still complain about taxes. Some things never change. When you think of the Byzantine Empire, don't picture endless wars and dusty maps. Picture candlelight glinting on mosaic gold. Picture a scribe nodding off over his parchment. Picture the sea wind lifting the silk banners on the palace terrace just before dawn. That's where it truly lived, in the small, unrecorded moments between grandeur and exhaustion. And somewhere within those walls, maybe a young boy dreams of sailing west to lands where Latin still echoes in broken temples. He'll never know that centuries later, people will argue about whether his city was Roman or Greek or something in between. To him, it's simply home, the only Rome that still breathes. As the night deepens, the lamps along the harbor are extinguished one by one. The city exhales, slow, content, unbroken. Tomorrow the markets will open, the prayers will rise, and the long, shimmering story of Byzantium will continue, stretching through ages of light and shadow. Morning seeps into the city like pale honey. The domes of Constantinople glow softly, their golden crosses catching the first rays over the Bosporus. Down in the harbor, fishermen already call out to one another, their voices mingling with the cry of gulls. The smell of tar, salt, and incense hangs in the air, the fragrance of an empire that prays as much as it trades. Let's walk with the crowd through the Mese, the main street that runs like a shining spine from the Emperor's palace to the markets beyond the gates. Marble colonnades cast long shadows. Bakers open their stalls, the smell of warm bread spilling into the morning chill. A child runs past with a basket of figs. A priest blesses him absently and keeps walking, his thoughts already somewhere between heaven and the next sermon. Life here is layered, like one of those mosaics glimmering on the church walls. From afar, everything looks smooth and radiant. Up close, you can see the tiny fractures, the pieces of glass and stone that don't quite fit. That's the Byzantine world, shimmering, imperfect, human. Inside Hagia Sophia, candles still burn from the dawn service. Their smoke curls upward into a dome that seems to float rather than stand. The marble floor reflects the gold above, and if you listen carefully, you can hear the faint hum of psalms echoing in Greek. Men and women cross themselves, bowing toward the altar where light streams through 40 narrow windows. Some stand in silence, others whisper their petitions. Illness, forgiveness, a good harvest, peace at sea. The air is thick with wax, incense, and longing. Outside again, the city moves at its own thoughtful pace. Merchants unload silks from Syria, honey from the Balkans, furs from Rus. You can hear half a dozen languages in a single alley: Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Latin, and sometimes the clipped tones of northern traders whose ships still smell of pine. A scribe sits near a pillar, his table covered in parchment. He writes letters for those who cannot write themselves, love notes, contracts, sometimes confessions. He charges by the word and smiles at gossip paid in silver. Everywhere the empire hums with quiet competence. Bureaucrats keep ledgers thicker than any prayer book. They measure taxes in grain, olive oil, or gold solidi, coins so perfect that merchants trust them for centuries. The emperor's officials, wrapped in purple-trimmed robes, move through corridors of mosaic and marble, their sandals whispering against the stone. They speak in formulas older than memory, for the glory of God and the stability of the realm. At midday, the sun floods the hippodrome. Charioteers in blue and green tunics thunder past the spina, the central barrier lined with ancient statues. The crowd roars, a living sea of color and allegiance. The races aren't just sport, they're politics, religion, emotion, all tangled together. When the blues win, the greens sulk. When tempers flare, riots spark like dry reeds in summer. More than one emperor has learned to fear the sound of those voices rising as one. Yet beneath the spectacle, Constantinople keeps its discipline. Water flows through underground cisterns, vast echoing halls filled with cool stone columns where torchlight shivers on the surface. Above ground, public baths steam with chatter. Old men debate theology between splashes. Even gossip here sounds philosophical. Is Christ one nature or two? Someone asks. Both, another replies, depending on who's emperor this week. The palace itself is a world within a world. Gardens, peacocks, whispering fountains, and corridors lined with guards whose armor glitters like fish scales. The emperor rarely walks alone. Every movement, every meal, every prayer follows ritual. When he appears before his subjects, the throne rises by hidden mechanism, and the audience gasps. For a heartbeat, he seems to float, suspended between earth and heaven. That's the point. The emperor is not just a ruler. He's the image of divine order, living proof that the cosmos still holds. Still, in private moments, one imagines him sighing. Even emperors grow tired of perfection. Let's slip away from the palace and wander toward the poorer quarters. Here the marble fades into plaster, the roads narrow, the air smells of smoke and boiled onions. Women wash clothes in shared courtyards. Children chase dogs through puddles. In a corner tavern, sailors drink rough wine and sing songs that would scandalize the court. And yet there's warmth here, the kind that palaces rarely know. The laughter is unpolished but real. Night approaches slowly. From every church, bells begin to call the faithful again. The city glows with small fires, candlelight in windows, torches along the walls, oil lamps floating on the harbor water. Priests chant in echoing procession. Their voices rise deep and ancient, blending with the hush of waves. You can almost feel the whole city breathe together, a long exhale after the day. Labor. Byzantium loves ceremony. Even the simplest acts carry meaning. Bread and wine aren't merely food, they're reminders of eternity. A contract sealed with wax isn't just business, it's a mirror of divine order. Every gesture, every icon, every mosaic fragment ties earth to heaven, law to faith, citizen to empire. Perhaps that is why the city feels both alive and dreamlike. It never stops trying to be more than itself. In the quiet of evening, scholars gather in the old university near the Forum of Constantine. Candles flicker over scrolls rescued from fading Rome, Homer, Aristotle, medical treatises on the humours. They read aloud, translating, arguing, preserving. One young student rubs his eyes and mutters that Aristotle never had to copy Aristotle by hand. His teacher laughs softly and reminds him that even wisdom requires endurance. Meanwhile, far beyond the walls, enemies stir. Slavs in the Balkans, Persians in the east. Yet the city sleeps without fear. Its triple walls rise higher than hope, each stone fitted with patient care. The towers watch the horizon, but inside those defenses, life continues almost unchanged. Fishermen still mend nets by lamplight. Lovers still meet by the cistern stairs. Time flows differently behind those walls. slow, circular, half-dream. Every empire tells itself it will last forever, but Byzantium makes that promise sound believable. It's not arrogance, just habit. For centuries it survives plagues, earthquakes, invasions, even its own ambition. Each time it falters, it rebuilds, as if the stones themselves refuse to surrender. Imagine walking the city's outer walls at midnight. The wind off the sea carries the scent of myrtle and salt. Below, the lamps of ships move like stars adrift. Inside the towers, guards murmur in Greek, stamping their feet against the cold. Somewhere, a dog barks, answered by another far away. The moonlight silver washes every dome, every cross, until the whole city looks carved from pale sleep. A monk once wrote that Constantinople was the heart that would not stop beating. Maybe he was right. Even when the world around it broke into fragments, Byzantium pulsed steadily, sending memory through every vein of history. For now, the empire is at peace. Tomorrow, envoys will arrive from distant lands, artists will lay new mosaics, merchants will haggle over silk, and choirs will rehearse for another feast day. The scent of incense will linger in the air, mingling with the smoke of bakeries and the salt of the sea, a perfume no conqueror can ever quite erase. Power in Byzantium has a peculiar scent, part incense, part iron, part dust from a throne that never cools. Every emperor inherits not only a crown, but the ghosts of those who wore it before. Each mosaic in the palace glitters with both glory and warning. You can almost hear the gold whispering, "All this will outlast you." The Palace of Constantinople is a city within the city, a labyrinth of gardens, halls, and echoing corridors where whispers travel faster than footsteps. Eunuchs glide between marble pillars, their silk slippers making no sound. Courtiers bow, smile, and calculate. Every look is a possible alliance, every silence a potential threat. Here, even friendship feels rehearsed. Imagine the emperor at dawn, not a conqueror on horseback, but a man seated before an icon, his crown heavy, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He prays for wisdom, yet his voice trembles slightly. Somewhere in the dark, a general sharpens ambition like a knife. In Byzantium, loyalty has the lifespan of a candle flame. Still, it's mesmerizing. The empire is theater, and everyone plays a part. When the emperor walks into the throne room, trumpets sound, golden curtains part, and courtiers fall to their knees in perfect choreography. The throne rises by hidden gears, the walls gleam with mosaics of saints, and the ruler becomes more than human, a reflection of cosmic order. For a heartbeat, even cynics believe it, but behind the stage reality stirs. Treasury ledgers groan under new taxes. Provinces rebel. Generals on the frontier grow bold, their victories whispering that maybe they deserve the throne. And inside the palace, the most dangerous wars are fought without armies, wars of rumor, marriage, and betrayal. Let's linger with one of those shadows. Empress Theodora, the silk merchant's daughter who rose to rule beside Justinian. Her beauty was famous, her will unbreakable. When rebellion erupted during the Nika riots and the palace shook with fear, Justinian nearly fled. Theodora stopped him with a single sentence. "Purple makes a fine shroud. Better to die as emperor than live in exile." He stayed. The city burned, but the crown remained. You can almost hear her voice still echoing in the marble, calm, defiant, tired of being underestimated. Later centuries breed new intrigues. Some emperors are monks dragged unwillingly from monasteries. Others are soldiers crowned in the chaos of the hippodrome. They reign briefly, then vanish into quiet cloisters or unmarked graves. The throne changes hands like a relic, kissed and cursed by all. In candlelit rooms, scribes record the events with serene precision. The emperor was deposed, one writes, and his eyes were put out. He dips his pen, blows gently on the ink, and begins the next line as if nothing extraordinary happened. In Byzantium, cruelty wears the mask of procedure. Even tragedy is neatly documented. Yet, amid all this, life continues. The city hums with prayer and commerce. Children still chase pigeons around fountains. The empire endures not because of its emperors, but despite them. Bureaucrats ensure that taxes flow, scholars copy Aristotle, and bakers rise before dawn. The state is a living organism. Emperors are merely its passing faces. Still, some leave marks that centuries cannot erase. Basil the Said, called the Bulgar Slayer, reigns with iron precision. He spends his life in armor, eating soldiers' rations, sleeping under stars rather than domes. When he dies, he asks to be buried outside the city walls, so that passing troops will see his tomb and remember that duty outlasts luxury. His empire stands firm for decades after, disciplined, unyielding, formidable. Then come softer emperors, more poets than warriors. They commission frescoes, debate theology, and compose hymns. One might spend hours staring at the sea from the Bucolion Palace balcony, wondering whether the world beyond those waters is worth ruling. It's easy to sympathize. The view from Constantinople is dangerously beautiful. Power here rarely ends quietly. Sometimes poison, sometimes daggers, sometimes a velvet exile to a monastery where the only crown is made of wood. Yet each fall is met with ritual calm. The empire, vast and ancient, absorbs every crisis like the sea absorbs rain. Let's picture a single night within those walls. Torches flicker. An old emperor, half blind, listens to his advisors argue. Outside, rain whispers against the domes. In another chamber, a young noble sharpens a dagger and rehearses a speech of loyalty. Down the hall, servants polish icons, pretending not to hear the murmurs. The scent of rose oil and damp stone mingles with anxiety. When dawn comes, one man will kneel and another will rise. And yet, faith softens even this harsh rhythm. Every coronation begins in Hagia Sophia, beneath the same vast dome that has witnessed triumph and despair alike. The choir sings in Greek, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. For a moment everyone, emperor, priest, beggar, believes mercy might truly exist. Between these cycles of glory and collapse, culture flourishes quietly. Artists carve ivory diptychs so fine they seem woven rather than chiseled. Scholars debate whether Plato or Christ understood truth more clearly. Monks illuminate manuscripts with tiny gold halos around every saint, their hands trembling but patient. God sees every letter, one writes in the margin. I only hope he forgives my spelling. The imperial court becomes a magnet for the world's beauty and ambition. Ambassadors from distant lands bring gifts, jade from China, furs from Kiev, perfumes from Arabia. They marvel at the golden walls, the mosaics that seem alive. One Persian envoy writes home that the emperor's throne glittered like sunrise on the sea. Another notes, perhaps more dryly, that the bureaucracy rivals heaven in its complexity. Yet beneath the shimmer lies fragility. The empire is a mosaic held together by faith and habit. A single earthquake, a single bad harvest, a single ambitious general can crack it. Still, it persists, perhaps because no one can imagine a world without it. There's a phrase Byzantines love, ta panta rei, everything flows. It's Heraclitus, the old Greek philosopher, reminding them that nothing stays the same. Maybe that's why they build in marble and gold, to challenge time itself, to make something that doesn't flow away. As night falls over the city, lamps glow in the palace windows. Somewhere inside, another emperor dreams of eternity. Outside, the Bosporus reflects the stars like a mirror, and the wind carries the faint scent of incense from Hagia Sophia. The empire sleeps, unaware that each dream brings it a little closer to its awakening or its end. Faith in Byzantium was not a private matter. It was the air itself, thick with incense, argument, and mystery. Every sunrise began with prayer, every law carried a blessing, and even politics pretended to kneel before heaven. To be Byzantine was to live between two worlds, one seen, one imagined, both equally real. If you strolled through Constantinople on a quiet morning, you might hear the same hymn drifting from half a dozen chapels. The melody slides through narrow streets, mingling with the sound of donkeys' hooves and merchants setting up their stalls. Even the pigeons seem devout, perching solemnly on the church domes like tiny stone saints. Faith wasn't something you visited on Sundays, it was something you breathed. Inside the churches, candlelight quivers against mosaic gold. Icons stare back at you, calm, patient, and almost alive. A woman kisses the feet of a painted Christ. A soldier lights a taper for his son at war. The air hums faintly, as if the building itself is praying. And somewhere in the shadows, a monk clears his throat, ready to correct anyone who crosses themselves in the wrong direction. Religion here wasn't simple belief, it was philosophy, politics, and passion woven together. People argued not about whether God existed, but about how he existed. Was Christ one nature, divine and human, fused like flame and wax? Or two natures joined but distinct, like music and its echo? These weren't idle debates. Entire empires rose and trembled over them, and bishops occasionally threw furniture. When words failed, art spoke. Mosaics bloomed like frozen light. Tiny bits of glass, blue, crimson, gold, assembled into visions of eternity. In Hagia Sophia, Christ Pantocrator gazes down from the dome, one hand raised in blessing, the other holding the book of life. You can almost feel his eyes follow you. Even if you sneezed during the service, you might whisper a quick apology, just in case. The empire's faith wasn't uniform, though it tried to be. In Cappadocia, monks carved entire monasteries into soft rock, living like birds in cliffs of tuff. They painted saints on their ceilings, where bats sometimes joined the choir uninvited. On Mount Athos, monks spent their days copying scriptures and politely pretending not to notice that everyone else was dozing off during the fifth psalm. Farther north, in Bulgaria and Rus, missionaries carried Byzantine Christianity to new peoples, and with it an alphabet, a sense of beauty, and a suspicion of Latin. Ah, Latin. The Western Church, distant cousins who had grown into noisy neighbors. Rome and Constantinople loved each other like brothers who shared a room too long. They prayed to the same God, but argued over almost everything. The date of Easter, the shape of bread, the filioque clause, and who got to sit in the nicest chair. For centuries they managed to stay polite, sending each other letters that began with "Most Blessed Brother" and ended with "May the Lord forgive your obvious heresies." Eventually, in 1054, words hardened into silence. The Great Schism wasn't loud, more like the sound of a heart quietly breaking. Still, Byzantium never lost its sense of divine purpose. The emperor wasn't just ruler, he was God's lieutenant on earth, the living icon of order. When he processed through the streets in full regalia, the people bowed as if sunlight itself were passing by. Priests sprinkled holy water on the horses, choirs sang hymns so slow they felt eternal. And in the palace chapel, the emperor would sometimes remove his crown, kneel and pray for victory or forgiveness, depending on how the week had gone. Faith shaped everything: art, law, even science. Physicians prescribed prayers along with poultices, astrologers calculated omens before battles, and historians described defeats as tests from God and victories as proof of divine patience. To a Byzantine, history wasn't a sequence of events. It was a long sermon with occasional footnotes. Not everyone agreed, of course. Iconoclasts, image breakers, claimed that holy art was idolatry, that people were kissing wood instead of worshipping God. So emperors banned icons, armies smashed mosaics, and nuns risked their lives to hide paintings behind false walls. For over a century, faith itself became a battlefield. Families divided, monks exiled, and one poor artisan lamented, "I only painted halos. Nobody told me halos were controversial." Eventually the icons returned, carried through the streets in processions so joyful that even the pigeons seemed relieved. Byzantium had found its reflection again. Let's pause in a small monastery courtyard, late afternoon. A breeze moves through cypress trees. The smell of wax and figs lingers. A monk named Michael is scraping parchment clean to reuse it. Paper is too precious to waste. As he works, he hums a hymn that's older than the walls. When asked what he's thinking, he smiles and says, "Just trying to save both souls and parchment." That's Byzantium in a sentence. Practical mysticism. Pilgrims arrived from everywhere. The Holy Land, Armenia, Georgia, even faraway Ireland. They came to see relics, a splinter of the true cross, a vial of Mary's tears, the sandal of some unfortunate saint. Merchants sold souvenirs, bits of cloth, oil from sacred lamps, or fragments of old icons that might or might not have been authentic. Let's just say the line between devotion and entrepreneurship was sometimes a bit blessedly flexible. Faith could comfort, but it could also command. During droughts, processions wound through the city. During earthquakes, the emperor himself walked barefoot, carrying icons through the streets. When plague came, priests burned incense in every quarter, claiming it purified the air. Modern medicine disagrees, but the city smelled heavenly for a while. And when wars threatened, generals prayed before battle, sometimes for victory, sometimes for mercy, sometimes for both. But perhaps the truest faith was in beauty itself. Walk into any church and look upward. Every inch of ceiling, every column capital, every arch hums with devotion. Even the floor mosaics, lions, vines, peacocks, tell stories of resurrection. It's as if the Byzantines wanted to remind God that they were paying attention, just in case he was grading on decoration. At night, when the candles gutter and the choir's last notes fade, the city seems wrapped in prayer. From the palace terrace you can see hundreds of small church domes glowing softly, like constellations fallen to earth. Each one a promise, a hope, a whispered Kyrie eleison. The empire sleeps, but faith does not. The priests will wake before dawn. The bells will ring again, and another day in the empire of faith will begin, part heaven, part human, all Byzantine. Every city dreams of peace, but Constantinople was born expecting war. Its walls, its towers, its gates, they were all prayers in stone. Even the sea seemed to bend respectfully around them, as if it too knew this city would need every wave as a shield. From the moment the first brick was laid, Byzantium understood that beauty alone would not save it. So it wrapped itself in walls so vast that travelers said they looked like mountains with doors. 3 layers of defense, each higher and thicker than the last. The Theodosian walls, named after an emperor who probably didn't get enough sleep. And between those layers, gardens, patrol paths, traps, and a few suspiciously well-fed cats who knew every hiding place. When danger came, and it always came, the city did not panic. It prepared. Watchmen lit signal fires on the towers, bells rang from Hagia Sophia, and people quietly began the strange dance of survival. Merchants shuttered their shops, bakers kneaded double rations, monks gathered relics for protection, and children whispered prayers to saints who specialized in emergencies of various types. The city had been besieged before, and it would be besieged again. Byzantium didn't flinch. It simply exhaled, tightened its belt, and waited. The Persians tried first, then the Arabs, then the Bulgars. Then, honestly, almost everyone with a spare army and a sense of optimism. Each came with dreams of conquest, each left with stories of walls that defied logic and defenders who fought like shadows. They called the city the Queen of Cities, and every queen has her admirers and her enemies. Let's picture one of those sieges. The Arab assault of 717. It's summer. The sea glows copper under the sun. A fleet of ships surrounds the harbor, their sails heavy with desert dust. Inside the city, Emperor Leo the Isaurian walks the ramparts, his armor faintly golden in the light. Below, his soldiers load the weapon that would make Byzantium legendary, Greek fire. A secret so closely guarded that even the recipe S ingredients were rumored to change with each emperor: pitch, sulfur, maybe dragon's breath, depending on who you asked. When the Arab fleet advanced, the Byzantines unleashed their secret. Flaming liquid arced through the air, sticking to sails, to water, to panic itself. Witnesses swore it hissed and laughed as it burned. One chronicler, perhaps trying to sound calm, wrote, "It was effective." Others were more honest. It was the wrath of the sea made visible. The attack failed. The city survived. And somewhere in the harbor, a sailor probably muttered, "Next time, maybe bring a bigger bucket." Centuries passed, and the city endured more sieges than sermons. Each left scars, but also stories. In the 9th century, the Rus came. Fierce traders turned raiders, their longships cutting across the Black Sea. They arrived roaring like thunder, demanding gold or glory. The Byzantines offered diplomacy first, then a demonstration of Greek fire. The Russes quickly decided that conversion to Christianity sounded much more appealing than cremation by chemistry. But not every threat came from outside. Sometimes the real danger was silence: hunger, disease, despair. During long sieges, the markets emptied. Bread shrank to crumbs, and the city learned what patience truly meant. Mothers boiled leather for soup, priests turned relics into morale, and yet the lamps of Hagia Sophia never went out. Faith, like the walls, held firm. There were quieter defenders too, the builders, the healers, the chroniclers who kept writing even as arrows clattered on the roof. One monk described the siege of 860 with eerie calm. On Tuesday, the enemy burned the ships in the Golden Horn. On Wednesday, it rained. On Thursday, we resumed copying the Psalms. A man after Byzantium's own heart, disciplined, slightly tired, still writing. Of course, not every defense relied on piety. Sometimes it relied on cleverness. Byzantines were masters of what we'd now call creative problem-solving. They'd bribe one enemy to attack another, marry off a princess to a barbarian king, and then send him theological pamphlets until he lost the will to fight. Even their spies were known for elegance. One famously smuggled plans hidden inside a loaf of bread. Another disguised himself as a monk and confessed to the enemy general, helpfully suggesting which sins required immediate surrender. But time, unlike any army, cannot be bribed. By the 11th century, the empire was smaller, poorer, slower to heal. The Crusaders, supposed allies, began marching east, promising to protect Constantinople. History has a dark sense of humor. When the Fourth Crusade arrived in 1204, they decided to conquer the city instead. And so, for the first time, Byzantium's great walls failed not from assault, but from betrayal. The Crusaders entered through fire and greed. Churches were stripped, icons shattered, gold melted down into coins. One knight, dazzled by Hagia Sophia, described it as a vision of paradise. Then he looted it anyway, because apparently heaven wasn't enough. The city wept, its marble streets dark with ash and sorrow. Even the cats seemed quieter that year. For a time, Constantinople became a ghost of itself, ruled by Latin lords who admired its treasures but never understood its soul. Yet the spirit of Byzantium, stubborn as ever, refused to die. In exile, the scholars of Nicaea and Trebizond kept teaching, copying, believing. One wrote, "Empires are like men. They die when they stop remembering." So Byzantium remembered. By 1261, the Greeks took back their city. Michael VIII, Palaiologos, entered Constantinople at dawn, barefoot, tears streaming, chanting hymns of return. He found a city half in ruin but wholly alive, walls cracked but hearts unbroken. The Hagia Sophia was cleaned, the mosaics restored, and the bells rang again for the first time in decades. If cities could sigh, Constantinople did that morning, long and relieved. Still, the centuries that followed were quieter, lonelier. The empire was smaller now, a thin strip of land, a fading candle against a wide night. Enemies pressed from every side, Turks, Venetians, debt collectors, even time itself. The great halls of the palace echoed with fewer footsteps. Libraries gathered dust, mosaics lost their shimmer. And yet, at Vespers, when the last light hit the domes, the city still looked eternal. Even ruin here was beautiful. Imagine standing on the walls one evening, centuries of ghosts beside you. The air smells of the sea and old prayers. You touch the stone, smooth from 1,000 hands, warm from the day's sun. Below, the Bosporus glitters like a mirror to another world. You'd think, just for a moment, that maybe all the battles, all the rebuilding were worth it, because the city still breathes. Even now, even after everything. That's the strange magic of Byzantium. It doesn't just resist destruction, it turns it into memory. Sieges become stories, silence becomes strength. And through every century, you can almost hear the faint hum of life, the same heartbeat that began when Constantine first looked east and saw the dawn reflecting on water. The walls stand in shadow, the people sleep, and somewhere deep beneath the city a drop of water falls in the cistern, steady, rhythmic, endless. A reminder that nothing built with faith, wit, and patience truly disappears. There comes a time in every great story when the light begins to fade, slowly, almost politely. Byzantium's twilight wasn't a single moment. It was a long golden dusk that lasted 200 years. The city still gleamed under sunsets of purple and gold, but the sound beneath those colors had changed. The markets were quieter, the palaces echoed more, and though the bells of Hagia Sophia still rang, their tone seemed older, softer, like a sigh that had learned to last. Imagine the capital in the 1300s. The streets still wind like veins between marble buildings, but weeds creep through the cracks. Once grand fountains trickle lazily, watched by cats who have forgotten the days of parades. A nobleman rides past in gilded armor, pretending not to notice that his escort now consists of 3 guards instead of 30. In the harbor, ships from Venice and Genoa sit like polite vultures, trading silk and spices while quietly measuring the city's pulse. Byzantium is still alive, but thinner, paler, like a candle burning on its last drop of wax. The empire that once stretched across seas now fits into a few provinces and a long memory. Villages whisper old stories of glory, half believing them. Farmers plough fields where emperors once marched, and in the city scholars still write, because if you cannot win battles, you can at least preserve wisdom. One philosopher jokes, "We have lost half the empire but gained twice the libraries." It's gallows humor, but there's pride in it too. Within the palace, things move at the rhythm of ritual. Emperors still hold councils, still sign decrees with red ink, still receive ambassadors who bow before them, though everyone knows the empire they represent could now fit inside those same marble walls. It's a strange sort of dignity, like an old actor performing his lines to an empty theater, but he does it beautifully, because the role deserves it. And outside, beyond the walls, the world is changing faster than Byzantium can pray. Gunpowder hums in the west. The Ottoman Turks are rising in the east, disciplined, youthful, certain. They build, expand, and wait, watching the old empire like heirs at a fading monarch's bedside. Occasionally they send polite letters, occasionally less polite armies. But Byzantium has always been stubborn. Its people know how to endure. Even now, markets still open at dawn, bread still bakes, and the same hymns echo through Hagia Sophia. Monks polish old icons, each stroke of the cloth an act of faith. Children play beside crumbling walls, throwing stones into the sea as if daring history itself to catch them. And scholars, the scholars, they copy, translate, debate, preserving the knowledge of 1,000 years. Without them, much of the ancient world would have vanished like smoke. Let's pause with one of those scholars, a man named Gemistus Plethon. He walks through the streets of the 1400s, robe faded, mind still on fire. He dreams of reviving Greek philosophy, of blending Plato with Christian thought. When he lectures, even tired soldiers stop to listen. He speaks not of war but of harmony, of rediscovering the light of reason. Someone once told him the empire was dying. He smiled and said, "Then let's make sure it dies educated." That's the thing about Byzantium. It never collapses in one dramatic crash. It dissolves gently like ink in water, leaving traces everywhere. Its language flows into the Orthodox world, its art into the Renaissance, its spirit into memory. While armies march and borders blur, Byzantium quietly teaches Europe how to be beautiful. The city itself remains miraculous. Even in decay, Constantinople looks eternal. The domes of Hagia Sophia catch the last light of evening. The sea shimmers like molten glass. Some nights the sky turns copper, and the whole horizon seems to glow. Travelers describe the sight in hushed voices, as though afraid to disturb the scene. Even dying, one Venetian wrote, she wears her crown. Yet life goes on in small, unremarkable ways. A baker complains that flour costs too much. A fisherman curses the weather. A monk sighs as his candle gutters out mid-prayer. And somewhere, a cat curls up beside a broken statue of an emperor no one remembers. The empire is fading, yes, but it is still full of life's little noises, the things history books rarely hear. Sometimes, humor softens the sorrow. When a foreign ambassador asked how large the Byzantine army was, a court official replied, "Large enough to hold a parade, if the weather is good." Another time, a priest scolded a young scribe for yawning during a sermon. The boy whispered, "I'm not bored, Father. I'm meditating vertically." You can almost hear Theodora's ghost chuckling in approval. Even the emperors retain their dry wit. John VIII. Palaiologos, weary of constant diplomacy, once told his ministers, "If I sign one more treaty, I'll need a second empire to keep them all." He traveled west to plead for aid, wearing imperial robes woven with stars, but the kings of Europe offered prayers instead of soldiers. He returned home with nothing but polite regrets and a deeper sense of irony. Meanwhile, in the monasteries, the monks keep their quiet rhythm, the endless copying of texts, the murmur of psalms, the squeak of quills. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance, not weather but the Ottomans testing their cannons. The monks pause, listen, and then keep writing. Faith, again, proving more durable than fear. Let's stand on the city walls one last time before the end. The view is the same. Water on both sides, stars overhead, silence in between. You can almost imagine the ghosts of emperors walking beside you. Justinian, Basil, Theodora, Constantine. They gaze eastward toward the rising Ottoman fires and westward toward the lands that forgot them. And yet their faces are calm. After all, they've seen worse. Byzantium was born from Rome, ashes. Who to say it won, to rise again. In the last decades, the city feels like a dream still half awake. Some days merchants gossip about trade. Other days they argue theology with the same intensity as their ancestors. When the muezzin's call drifts faintly from across the strait, no one panics. They simply cross themselves, light a candle, and go back to their work. Resignation here feels strangely dignified, like old marble weathering into art. A chronicler in 1450 wrote, "Everything decays except the habit of hope." He wasn't wrong. Byzantium never learned to surrender, it merely learned to whisper. And those whispers carried through the centuries, through the scholars fleeing west with books under their arms, through the churches that kept the old chants, through the hearts of those who still looked east when they prayed. As the final century slips away, Constantinople glows like a lantern in fog. The world around it moves on. Empires rise, maps change. But here, in the last Byzantine twilight, time seems to hesitate, unwilling to blow out the flame. For even history, that impatient teacher, sometimes lingers before closing a beautiful book. The streets grow quiet now. The harbor reflects the moon. And from the great dome of Hagia Sophia, one last candle still burns, its flame trembling against the dark. It flickers, but it does not go out. Dawn breaks softly over the Bosporus, the last dawn of an empire. The sea is calm, the air clear, and for a brief, merciful moment, Constantinople looks untouched. The domes still gleam, the gulls still circle, and the bells of Hagia Sophia still toll like they've done for 1,000 years. But this morning they sound heavier, as if the bronze itself knows what's coming. It is May of 1453. The city has lived through more sieges than generations, but this time feels different. On the hills beyond the walls, the banners of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II ripple in the early light, red and black against the rising sun. Cannons, the likes of which the world has never seen, point toward the Theodosian walls. They are massive, iron-throated monsters, fed by powder and ambition. The future has arrived, and it smells faintly of smoke. Inside the walls, Emperor Constantine XIX Palaiologos walks the battlements in silence. His armor glints in patches of morning light. His face is tired, noble, resigned. He is not expecting victory, only honor. Behind him, the city stirs awake one last time. Priests prepare relics. Citizens gather stones for defense. And somewhere in the quiet streets, a child ties a small wooden cross around his neck. Even the cats seem solemn, their tails low, as though they too sense the weight of the day. Let's pause for a moment. Breathe in that stillness and the strange beauty before catastrophe. The sun warms the marble domes. A breeze stirs the flags. And for a heartbeat, all of history holds its breath. If you listen closely, you might even hear the soft murmur of a prayer drifting from the Hagia Sophia, words older than empire itself. Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. Then the silence breaks. A thunder rolls through the earth. The first cannon fires. The sound is enormous, shaking the air like the sky itself has cracked. Stone splinters, Dust fills the morning light, and the siege begins. For weeks, the bombardment continues, day after day, night after night. The people of Constantinople endure it with weary grace. Bakers keep baking, monks keep chanting. And one old woman is said to have stood outside her home, sweeping the street each morning, declaring, "If the city falls, at least it will fall clean." That's the Byzantine spirit, defiance with a touch of housekeeping. Inside Hagia Sophia, priests hold continuous liturgies. The dome trembles with each explosion, yet the candles stay lit. When the walls crack, people patch them with broken marble, wood, even furniture. Children run messages through streets lined with rubble. And at night, when the cannon fire pauses, the citizens climb the roofs to look at the stars, the same stars that once watched over Justinian, Basil, and Theodora. Perhaps in their quiet way, they pray not for deliverance, but for remembrance. Mehmed II, young and brilliant, watches from his tent. He is barely 21, but his mind is centuries old. He studies every crack in the wall, every pattern of defense. To him, Constantinople is not just a prize. It is destiny. He dreams of uniting worlds, of building something new upon the ruins of the old. And somewhere in the heart of the city, one suspects a few Byzantines almost admire him for it. Then one night, the moon darkens. An eclipse. The city falls silent. For generations, prophets had said that when the moon hides its face, the empire will fall. And so, as the shadow passes across the sky, even the bravest feel a shiver. Faith, for all its strength, trembles too. The final assault comes on May 29th. Before dawn, the Sultan's drums beat like the heartbeat of war. Trumpets blare, prayers are shouted in Turkish and Arabic, and the cannons roar again. Inside the walls, Constantine IX gathers his men. He removes the imperial purple cloak, kneels before the altar in Hagia Sophia, and whispers a final prayer. Then he rides out to fight, not as emperor, but as a soldier among soldiers. No one will ever see him again. Some say he fell near the gate of St. Romanus, sword in hand. Others say he vanished, turned to marble, waiting to rise when the city is free again. Either way, his story ends like his empire, now standing. When the Ottomans finally break through, the defenders fight street by street, doorway by doorway. The city resists even in defeat. The cry, "The city is taken," echoes through the alleys, carried by wind and disbelief. In Hagia Sophia, the last service continues. As the doors are forced open, the candles flicker out one by one, not from wind, but from history closing its eyes. And yet, even in that moment, something remains unbroken. The mosaics of Christ and the Virgin still shimmer beneath layers of smoke. The marble floors still gleam faintly through the dust, and on one of the high domes, a single ray of sunlight pierces through, falling on the open gospel at the altar. The words are in Greek, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. After the storm comes silence. The new city, now Istanbul, wakes slowly. Mehmed enters Hagia Sophia, dismounts, and bows to the ground in prayer. He orders the church to be spared, its beauty preserved. He walks beneath the great dome and whispers, "My kingdom is eternal." But perhaps deep down he knows he is only borrowing it. No one ever truly owns Constantinople. It only allows guests. Years pass. The Byzantine world vanishes from maps, but not from memory. Its scholars scatter westward, carrying manuscripts under their arms. Plato, Euclid, Homer, Aristotle. They bring the Renaissance with them, though few realize it at the time. A dying empire quietly becomes the midwife of modernity. You could say Byzantium's last gift to the world was rebirth itself. And still, in the great church by the sea, the mosaics shimmer under plaster, waiting. For centuries they sleep in silence, but sunlight sometimes finds them, slipping through cracks, touching gold that refuses to fade. People who walk there today, tourists, pilgrims, dreamers, sometimes feel it, that soft hum beneath the stone. The city still remembers. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing on the old sea walls at dusk. The call to prayer drifts through the air, blending with the faint echo of bells that no longer ring. The wind smells of salt and roses. Ships move quietly across the same waters that once carried legions and pilgrims and poets. And beneath it all, if you listen closely, you can almost hear the whisper of history, not mourning, but remembering. Once, it says, there was a city built on both earth and heaven. It fell, yes, but not entirely, because some lights never go out. They simply change windows. The Empire of Byzantium is gone, yet its reflection glows everywhere, in art, in faith, in the quiet persistence of beauty against time. Every cathedral dome that mirrors the sky, every illuminated manuscript, every hymn in a minor key, they all carry a fragment of that vanished world. It was never just a nation, it was a state of mind, half discipline, half dream. So when the night deepens and the world feels fragile, remember Constantinople, the city that refused to die quickly, the empire that fell softly, the light that kept shining through the dust. If you enjoyed drifting through this piece of the past, maybe leave a like, or just let the story carry you to sleep. Because tonight, somewhere between the stars and the sea, the last light of Byzantium is still burning, quietly, beautifully, forever.